Before we begin with the proceedings of the session, we would like to welcome all our dignitaries and guests on the dais with bouquet of flowers. Now, I would call upon Dr. Lata Pillai, Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor, to kindly deliver the welcome address.
Ms. Nandita Das, Speaker of this afternoon, respected Vice Chancellor Professor V.N. Rajshekharan Pillai, students, members of the administrative staff, and all invitees present here today. Ms. Nandita Das, actor, director, writer, orator, spokesperson for the UNDP, a person who wears many hats and doesn't need too much of an introduction. To me, she is yet another woman who has broken the glass ceiling. She will speak today on the concept of them and us, which has frequently polarized groups and formulated public opinions. Known for her strong advocacy role on issues pertaining to social justice and human rights, identity and the notion of the other is a topic which is passionate to her and which has captivated many audiences. I'm sure it will not be any different this afternoon. I'd also like to welcome Professor V.N. Rajshekharan Pillai, Vice Chancellor of the University, who's been a constant source of support for this activity. A warm welcome to all of you.
Thank you, Madam. I would now like to request Honorable Vice Chancellor to kindly share his remarks with us.
Ms. Nandita Das, Dr. Lata Pillai, Pro Vice Chancellor, on behalf of the University, let me welcome Ms. Nandita Das, a distinguished visitor to the University, for giving one of the Silver Jubilee lectures. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now I'd like to request our speaker today, Srimati Nandita Das, to kindly come and deliver her address.
Thank you, Professor Pillai, for inviting me to this wonderful series. This is a subject that's close to my heart. I know I'm in an academic institute and where there's knowledge but I have no academic knowledge about the subject that I'm going to speak to all of you about. Today, what I'm going to do is a stream of consciousness conversation. It is a subject, I think, which is close to my heart, as I'm sure all of yours as well, because all of us at some level are grappling with this thing called identity. We're all wondering whether what is my identity, from a spiritual sense to a very practical way, thinking of how do I define myself, how am I defining myself, how are others defining me, how important is it to do with the ego, is it to do with who I am at this point of time, does my identity change? That one little word, identity, has so many meanings and ramifications. So do I assert my identity? Do I distance from it? Do I deal with the ambiguity that the identity brings? And when the identity comes, I think when the notion of the self comes, then there is a notion of the other. And this has always fascinated me. Some of you, if you've seen the film that I directed, it was my first film called Firak. And the central theme, in fact, is a lot more. It is set a month after the Gujarat carnage, which was in 2002. But the central theme of the film is really identity and how we struggle with it. This subject has fascinated me for a very long time because I have to say I've been very privileged in growing up in a family that was very liberal, very open. But when you are growing up in a certain family, you don't think it's any different. You don't think it's more open than someone or more conservative. You just think that's the norm. So I grew up with a father who's a painter, mother who is a writer. And when I was really young, she used to go to the office. So 9 to 5, she was doing a job. And my father would cook and clean. And I thought for recreation, he painted. So I luckily had a role reversal at a very young age where I didn't think that mothers had to stay at home and fathers had to go to work. So for me, that was normal, that mothers go to work and fathers stay at home. So I was really fortunate to have that kind of an open environment where there was a lot of space to question, which sadly most of our education system, our societal system, doesn't allow us the space, and especially for young people. I do a lot of talks, interactions in colleges, and the reason it fascinates me is because I just feel that because that space, that open space doesn't exist, but yours is an open university, so I'm sure you take that word rather seriously, more seriously than others, because I think that space is shrinking, where we can actually have a dialogue, where we can be vulnerable, where we can just say what we feel like and hear others and form our opinions and change our opinions, and not sort of feel the compulsion that this is how I think and I must fight for it come what may. Or even to take a stand, to feel strongly enough and to have that conviction, and then to have the courage to carry through that conviction. All of this, I think, needs a lot more thinking aloud. So I was really fortunate that I grew up in an atmosphere where there was a lot of brainstorming, a lot of questioning, a lot of openness. And while my parents were not really political, I don't remember any political conversations and discussions as a child. I wasn't taught any ism per se, but I'm glad when I look back that without teaching any isms, any theory of it, which I learned later, and it definitely has its own place, and I'm glad I did whenever I did, but without knowing the isms, the kind of, whether it was gender sensitivity, all the big words, which are important words that we have learned in our later years, whether it is a humane quality of not being prejudiced, or, all of those were just basic human values. And that, to just grow up with that, not having to do it because it's the right thing to do in a sort of theoretical framework, but it's the right thing to do as a human being. And then you suddenly, as you grow up, you get the rude shock that the world isn't all that there is a lot more that has happened. There's a lot more in the atmosphere, so to say, in whether it's your own society, whether it's your own little world, whether it's the country, whether it's the world. And that's when you start making sense of it and start realizing that, yes, maybe I was privileged. And that's why I said that it's important for me to just share that I do recognize the fact that that openness, which, unfortunately not all of us get to have, that has definitely helped me to question things. The first time that I started engaging more sort of deliberately or more consciously with socio-political issues was through street theatre during my college days. And at that time, it was fascinating that while all this was there in my home environment, I was not exposed to other realities of the world. Because all of us are also insulated in our little worlds. And, and there is a lot more that exists beyond that world. So through the plays that we would evolve, through the plays that we would improvise, through the experts who would come to tell us about those subjects, whether it was on gender issues, whether it was on economic policy, whether it was on communalism, whether it was on education, it was a great exposure for me. I would go to industrial towns and factories that I had never seen and talk about workers' rights and understand how the male workers' rights were different from the female workers' rights, or go to various bastis and talk to them. I remember the first play I did was on dowry death, and we had these orange ribbons to sort of show the fire, and I was in the middle of it as the victim or as the woman who was actually being burnt. And after the play, we used to take these chadars to, just take them around to get the donations for the play. And I would see that people who couldn't afford a rupee or two would sometimes give 10 rupees or even 50. Or some woman would come crying or would touch me and say that, "Tum theek to ho, beta tumhare saath itna bura hua." And I used to think this is just a play. Why are they reacting in such a strong way? Because it had happened to them. For me, till then, it was a story in the papers. It was somewhere tucked away. It was a horrible thing. I felt strongly about it, but I felt strongly about it intellectually, not knowing that it really happens to people. So sometimes when we think of numbers or a little item in the paper, we think that it's about somebody there. It's not part of my world. It's only when you actually interact, you meet, you will get exposed. That's why someone said when millions die, it's statistics. But if you know the human story of one person, then it's a tragedy. And, as you start interacting and exposing yourself to other realities, you realize that there is this us and them at every level that is perpetuating. working in gender issues, that was something again very close to my heart. And I started wondering, why are there certain identities that I want to completely distance from, and why are there certain identities that I want to claim? For instance, the gender identity, I felt like I wanted to speak for the women. And sometimes the male friends would often tease and say, oh, well, you are such a privileged woman, you have a brother and all of that, but you've never been treated differently. Why do you need to talk about women's issues? And of course, there are those kind of rumors कि आजकल तो औरतें आदमियों से आगे चली गई हैं, ये सब, it's like overdone. Of course, we are talking about a very small percentage of privileged women, mostly who are in urban areas. But one would still hear things like this. And I think it was the burden of knowing that one is so privileged. And yet there are so many women who do not have the space to voice their, their angst or their struggles or their inequalities. And I think it was just one of those things that you almost feel guilty about. Then you come to terms with it and you say, okay, I've got this space and I'm going to use it well. So it was around that time that I started being fascinated about this whole thing of multiple identities. So I'm an Indian, I'm half Odia, half Gujarati. I was born in Bombay, I'm a Delhiite, I lived all my life in Delhi, and depends in what circumstances I am. If I'm in a room full of vegetarian, then my identity is of a non-vegetarian. If I'm in a room full of scientists, then I'm a non-scientist, or whatever that term is, then that's my identity. The identity also changes depending on where you are and what your context is. And there are some identities out of this that we are just born into. And the saddest thing is that the identities we haven't even chosen, we have no role to play. When we are made to feel ashamed or proud of it, then it seems really strange. So if I am a woman, or if I am an Indian, or if I am a Hindu, there's nothing I've done for all these things. I just happen to be that. So if you're going to make me feel terrible, or even proud for that matter, for something I've not done, it just seems like it's unfair. I need to be held accountable maybe for what I think, what I do, my actions, what I say. For that, if you make me feel ashamed or proud, I can understand. So this is what started really deeply bothering me, that we, not only in our country, but in the world, are holding people holding against them for what they are born in. And they are having to be either aggressive or having to be either defensive, because you push somebody to the wall and say, this is your identity, this is how I see you. Whether that person is 100 other things, maybe that person doesn't even care about that aspect of that identity, but suddenly that becomes the most important thing. So for the acquired identities, I still understand, but for the born identities, it's really sad that that is what is primarily dividing us so much, in the name of God, as they say, is what is dividing us. There are other identities, of course. There's an identity of sexual orientation. And I think my brush at a very close level with that was when I did a film called Fire, which was my first film. And it was on homosexuality. While my family was so liberal and all of that, it was a subject that we really never discussed at home. So it was again something that I had understood intellectually, where I had understood that there shouldn't be any prejudice, that everybody has a right to live the way they want to. But I didn't quite understand to what extent we had stigmatized this, to what extent people lived with that stigma, or to what extent we were insensitive in the way we treated the other. And that is when I really started realizing this whole notion of the other in a very sort of close way, because experientially when I did the film, after the film, there were all kinds of questions. There was a whole range of questions that came about in the public domain, in public debates. Also, you would meet a friend or an acquaintance. I would be on a flight and the person sitting next to me would suddenly say, कि वो film आपको नहीं करनी चाहिए थी. That was a wrong thing. You have now taught all these women to be lesbians, as if you can learn in an hour and 40 minutes. Because if that was true, there wouldn't be any homosexuals, because all the stories that we have grown up with are of Raja and Rani. They aren't of Raja and Raja and Rani and Rani. So I don't understand how that happened. But because I had this range of questions, it helped me also to grow. It helped me to be more sensitive and realize that how phobic we were as a society, how hypocritical we were, because a lot of people kind of said, yes, we know it exists, but why talk about it? There was this thing of wanting to distance from it, or pushing it under the carpet, or feeling uncomfortable. But even feeling uncomfortable is okay. I mean, I think a society which hasn't discussed it would be uncomfortable. So the good thing with FIRE that happened was there was so much conversation, debate and dialogue that it forced people to look at their own prejudices. And a lot of people who realized that they just didn't know enough about it. So there is also this, as they say, the fear of the unknown. When you don't know something, you fear it, because then you have your own preconceived notions, you build a story around it. Like if, there would be a meeting with some gays and lesbians, they would say, oh, can you show me what does a gay look like? Or, what does a lesbian look like? It's like saying, do seeing nahi nikle. It's exactly the same feeling. It's the same. If there's a good doctor, he or she just has to be a good doctor, give me the right medicine and talk to me nicely and make me feel comfortable and, secure. That's the role of a doctor. Now, I don't care what religion that doctor has or what sexual orientation that doctor has, but suddenly that became a huge thing. As some of you might recollect that in 98, when the film released, there was an attack on the Regal Theatre and a couple of other places where there was complete vandalism. And in response to that, people came out on the streets, students, teachers, professionals, everybody just spontaneously came out and said, we need freedom of expression. You can't tell us what to watch and what not to watch. That's not, tomorrow you're talking about this film, it'll be about something else. And if you see in the last 15 years how intolerant we have become. So with FIRE, it was a great learning for me, because from something that I had understood intellectually, I started understanding it emotionally. There were people who would come and confide and tell me their stories that I was aghast with. And I have seen so many people feeling just guilty because of their identity, because of the way they just felt. They're like, I feel like a woman trapped in a man's body. What do I do? This is who I am. A few years ago, there was a huge Hijra Habba in Bangalore. It was sort of a festival of eunuchs. And I was invited for it. And they said, the police commissioner here is really catching a lot of us and putting us behind bars and calling us criminals. And he's also going to be coming for the function. And we need somebody to really speak up. And I went there, and I can tell you that's been one of the most memorable evenings. There were about thousands and thousands of transvestites and eunuchs and, transgenders and gays and a whole different community that one is not exposed to. You see eunuchs on the street and you have a certain notion. I grew up fearing people, thinking, oh, paise mangte hain, ya zor se bol denge, kuch aisa, they will say something or do something that's going to offend us. You grow up as in a society, you just grow up with those things and you don't realize how prejudiced you are. I think all of us are prejudiced about something or the other. So, you want to be more open, but you're not sure whether you really are. And I can tell you that evening definitely changed me, because the kind of stories I heard, the kind of things that people were talking about, the kind of stigma that they go through, their struggles, why are they on the street, how closed our society is from them to do any other thing. And I remember the police commissioner there said, friends and eunuchs, whatever that meant. That's how he started his speech. And they were still very patiently listening to him. And he wanted to leave immediately after that. And I said, sir, I've waited and heard you speak, and I'm sorry, you'll have to wait till I speak. And I sort of almost forced him, and I said, when you say friends, then you don't make these demarcations. Once you say friends, then everybody is a friend, right? So it was just one of those evenings that were truly eye-openers for me. And I realized that they were probably one of the most marginalized communities, where me, with my own liberal ideas and my own openness, I too was hesitant to kind of speak up or even feel completely comfortable. After that, of course, I started getting more and more involved in women's work, in gender issues. But lately, in the last 10 years, I would say that the sectarian violence, what we call the communal violence, that has been the most bothersome. Because again, it deals with an identity that you're born into, that you happen to be in a certain community, whether it's Christians or whether it's Sikhs, whether it's Muslims, whether it's Hindus. The fact that we as a nation chose to be secular, I think it's such a privilege. So if we start reversing it, we'll have to really go back to जिसको कहते हैं बाबा आदम के ज़माने में जाना पड़ेगा, because there is nothing. There are layers and layers of influences that has made the India of today. You cannot dissect it and just take out a certain section without sort of really, creating a big disruption in everything else. And that was something that sort of deeply started bothering me with the Babri Masjid demolition, started working in this issue with various groups, started realizing how a community that is a minority, how it feels pushed to the wall, what are the repercussions of it, what are the defense mechanisms, what is the complex that develops, what is the aggression that it also brings out. And in some ways, when the Gujarat carnage happened in 2002, that was like really, jab kehte hain pani sar se utar jata hai, that where a state can participate. It's almost like saying कि अगर राजा शोषण करे तो प्रजा किसके पास जाए? Usually that's why we use the word carnage and not even riots, because usually what we understand by riot is a spontaneous combustion of violence that happens between two communities because of a certain incident, and usually the government or the administration or some kind of a government machinery intervenes and separates. In simplistic terms, that's what a riot would be. The fact that violence affects us all, the fact that violence spares nobody, you and me, we can say, oh, that's happening in Gujarat, that's happening in Kashmir, that's happening in Nicaragua, that's happening in Sarajevo. But the world, when we say globalization hua hai, uski ek achhi cheez hui hai that the world has actually become much smaller in these ways. That it has made us aware that whether it is economics, we know about the economic meltdown, whether it is ecology, we know how the climate change is happening everywhere, whether it is violence, that all our lives are interconnected. Something that's happening there is going to come here. It is going to affect your and my life. So we cannot sit and wish it away and pretend or hope that this will not affect me and my life. It definitely will. I'm not here to blame anybody in particular. What is saddening is that we in our minds have created these divisions. We in our minds have given more space to prejudices and that kind of conditioning than the humaneness that this country actually should be fostering. And, the kind of saints we have had, the kind of educationists we have had, the kind of atmosphere, the spirituality. We talk about India, this great spiritual country. But in real terms, I think we in ourselves have divided and created these divisions so deeply that we are all dealing with those prejudices. I'm proud to be an Indian and it's all very good. But is it the geographical border that makes it India? When I go to Kerala, I go to Kashmir, or I go to the Northeast, I automatically know this is my country. I may not be able to understand the language, the food may be completely different, but something immediately tells me that's my country. So when I go to Lahore or I go to Sindh in Pakistan, where I shot this film called Ramchand Pakistani, which was very similar to Kutch, where I had been earlier, and I felt, my God, it's one area which has been divided right in the middle. Similarly, the Punjab has been divided right in the middle. In fact, there is far more affinity on two sides of the border than they would have maybe with Karnataka or Kerala or Nagaland or Mizoram. How much do we even know about the Northeast? We claim, that's part of our country. Tomorrow, if somebody wanted a part of Northeast, we will die for it. Even though we'd never go there, we would never know anything about it. We really don't even care what's going on there. Whether people are happy, not happy, what are the problems. All we know is there's insurgency, because that's all the media wants to tell us. So it is so much about what we choose to call us. I, me, myself, we, us. How we define that and how we define the other. Whether it's geographical, whether it's religious, whether it's any of these notions of the other. So this is broadly, I've just given you a little bit of a glimpse of just the experiences that I've had and the questions that I have raised to myself and to others. And the reason I feel strongly and the reason I feel it is important to speak up, because often I do believe that most people are good people, that most people are peace-loving people, that most people do not want to harm anybody else. But it's because we keep quiet about many of these issues that the smaller numbers gain so much more momentum. And I'd just like to close this with a wonderful quote that I just remembered of Martin Luther King, where he says that he, of course, as you know, was fighting against apartheid, but what he said about apartheid and is very relevant even to the issues we are talking about. He said, "In our times we will repent, not for the evil deeds of the bad, but for the silences of the good." So I just think it's time to speak up. Thank you.